Hey there, horror fans, and welcome to the Eric Fright Show, your go-to haunt for all things spooky. I'm your horror host, Eric, and each episode, we dive deep into the heart of horror, from real-life nightmares to the silver screen's most terrifying moments. So, grab your popcorn, dim those lights, and let's plunge into another chilling fright fest together. What's up, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of the Eric Fright Show. I'm your host, Eric Fright. I am so excited for this third episode. We're taking a step into a more comedic direction, and we're going to be discussing the 1992 film Buffy the Vampire Slayer. Now, if you follow me for as long as I've been doing anything, you already know I'm a die-hard Buffy the Vampire Slayer fan of the TV series, but I rarely talk about Buffy the Vampire Slayer, the movie. So I thought it was high time that I actually did an episode on it, because this is where my love for Buffy began. I am a huge fan of this movie, and I'm going to give it its dues. But before we talk about the movie, you already know what we got to do. First segment, we're going to jump right in to Fright Files. So, obviously, we're talking about Buffy the Vampire Slayer. So, it only makes sense for this episode's Fright Files to center around vampires. So, are vampires real? Do you guys believe in vampires? I do. I believe in people thinking that they're actually vampires or pretending to be vampires to some extent. Jesus, I'm a podcaster who can't speak. Isn't that terrible? So I went on a little dive like I usually do. And this time what I found for you guys is over at history.com, and it's vampire history. So I'm going to read a little bit about it. And this is updated as recently as June 25th of this year. So on history.com, I'm going to quote it, and it says, "What is a vampire?" It says, "There are almost as many different characteristics of vampires as there are vampire legends. But the main characteristic of vampires is they drink human blood. They typically drain their victims' blood using their sharp fangs, killing them and turning them into vampires. In general, vampires hunt at night since sunlight weakens their powers. Some may have the ability to morph into a bat or a wolf. Vampires have super strength and often have a hypnotic, sensual effect on their victims. They can't see their image in a mirror and cast no shadows." So that's the History Channel's definition of vampires. And I think it's pretty interesting because there's some things in there that I am a fan of vampires, I guess you would say. I haven't, not been exposed to all of these different things, because for me, I didn't think sunlight just weakened their powers. I thought it just straight up killed them. I thought they would just die if they hit sunlight. Also, I've never seen a vampire turn into a wolf that I can recall at this very moment. But again, I could be wrong. I'm going to read another part of this article, which the heading is, "Are Vampires Real?" So this is the fun part, right? Quote, "Vampire superstition thrived in the Middle Ages, especially as the plague decimated entire towns. The disease often left behind bleeding mouth lesions on its victims, which to the uneducated was a sure sign of vampirism. It wasn't uncommon for anyone with an unfamiliar physical or emotional illness to be labeled a vampire. Many researchers have pointed to porphyria." I don't even know what that is. Okay, it's a blood disorder that can cause severe blisters on skin that's exposed to sunlight, as a disease that may have been linked to the vampire legend. And I'm going to stop real quick. Don't come for me if I can't pronounce something. I'm trying here. I'm going to continue now. Some symptoms of porphyria can be temporarily relieved by ingesting blood. Other diseases blamed for promoting the vampire myth include rabies or goiter. When a suspected vampire died, their bodies were often interred to search for signs of vampirism. In some cases, a stake was thrust through the corpse's heart to make sure they stayed dead. Other accounts describe the decapitation and burning of the corpses of suspected vampires well into the 19th century. So that's pretty interesting. So even if, it takes us back to like how crazy our history really is. Like tying the folklore and tying the legends to actual reality, right? Like we know vampire stuff because of the movies and the TV shows and the books that we read, like all the different media, right? But like when we read like actual historical accounts, like the Salem witch trials, or people believing that they're vampires, or people believing that somebody was a vampire, and the things that people did to other people, dead or alive, is just so crazy. Like I don't even understand like where this all even came from. I mean, we're reading about it, but it's just so wild that it's like, this isn't a movie or a book. These are things that actually freaking happened, right? So speaking of that, I went on a little bit more of a deeper dive, and I found a page called mentalfloss.com, and it has an article, and it's titled 8 Real Life Vampire Crimes. And I wanted to read a few of those with you, with number 1 being the Countess of Elizabeth Bathory. Now, I have heard about Elizabeth Bathory from, I don't even know where. I think it was from this game I used to play called Nightmare, and it was like a board game with a VHS tape, and she was a character, and there was like a backstory about her. But let's read about who she really was from this article. So here we go. An early adopter of the vampire defense was Countess Elizabeth Bathory, a member of the Hungarian royal family whose cruelty toward her female servants was said to have included drenching them in water and leaving them to freeze to death outside in the winter. But it wasn't until 1609, following the murder of a young noblewoman, which Bathory staged to look like a suicide, that she was made accountable for her crimes. While it's difficult to separate fact from fiction in Bathory's case, the legend surrounding her suggests that she killed more than 650 women and bathed in their blood, which she believed to have restorative powers. Bathory and 4 of her servants were eventually charged with 80 counts of murder, though the countess died while under house arrest before ever being brought to trial. In the book Dracula Was a Woman, historian Raymond T. McNally claims that Bathory was in part the inspiration for Bram Stoker's famous Bloodsucker. That's wild to me. More than 650 women? That's so crazy. That's like the largest. I don't know anyone that has been claimed to have killed more than that. That is a record. Like, we're talking hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of women dead by this other woman's freaking hands. Also, bathing in the blood for restorative powers is creepy, but what she did, like drenching them in water and putting them out to freeze to death, that is demented. Here's another person on the list. Their name is Fritz Herrmann. This one is also known as the Vampire of Hanover. Fritz Herrmann was one of the world's first serial killers, and one of its most prolific. Between 1918 and 1924, he murdered at least 24 people, many of whom he killed by biting through their necks. On December 19, 1924, Herrmann was sentenced to death by guillotine for his crimes. He was beheaded on April 15, 1925. So that scientists could study Herrmann's brain, his head was preserved in a jar. It is kept at a medical school in Göttingen, Germany. Probably did not pronounce that right, and I don't know if I said it, but just for sake of saying it again, I am directly quoting and reading this article from mentalfloss.com, so that is where you can go and find it. Again, it's called 8 Real Life Vampire Crimes. Anyway, moving on, there is another one that I wanted to read. I'm going to skip down here to number 8, who is Josephine Smith, who is a shuttered Hooters restaurant. May not be the first place you'd think of as a vampire lair, but it's where 22-year-old Josephine Smith attacked a 69-year-old homeless man in 2011 as he slept in St. Petersburg, Florida. Smith allegedly told the man that, "I am a vampire, I am going to eat you," before she bit off pieces of his face, lips, and arm. The victim managed to escape and called police, who found Smith covered in blood at the crime scene with no recollection of the incident. I wanted to definitely read that one because it was recent. It was like the 2000s, so it's not like this tall tale legend. But we are going to sit here, and no offense, but it's in Florida. It's always Florida with you guys. What's going on down there? Is it the water? Is it the government? I don't know what's going on. It's definitely the drugs. But she has no recollection. That sounds more like a vampire possessed her. I need more information on Josephine Smith. Like, did they drug test her? What did she come back positive for? Because she clearly, if she didn't remember, she really isn't a vampire. For a moment, she was either possessed by a vampire or on some fucking heavy shit. But anyway, those are some real accounts of vampires, well, quote unquote real accounts, as well as a little bit of information on vampire history. But for me, personally, my personal experience with vampires in the media, because I have no personal experience with vampires in my actual life. Like, I've never met a vampire or anything like that. It really started for me with The Lost Boys. Now, that is a fucking great movie. I actually haven't seen it since I was a kid because it terrified me so much, especially Kiefer Sutherland's character. Like, I just can't watch that movie so much when I was growing up because I just was terrified. Definitely one that I want to go and I do love it, and I want to watch it again just to refresh and see it from an adult point of view. I'm sure he'll still terrify that little boy inside me, but I'm a grown man now too that can handle that. But then came this movie that we're talking about today, Buffy, where it's like a dark comedy, but it's a strong girl who got power to fight these vampires back, right? So I thought that was just so freaking cool. I always was like really attracted to the world of vampires, whether they were good or evil. There was just something attractive about the way they carried themselves. So I like their gothic aesthetic and everything about that. So with Buffy, I thought it was really cool that she was not any of that. She was a completely different character than that entire world. So that's where my attraction for that came in. So that leads me to segue into our part 2 of this podcast, which is segment 2, Featured Fright. Attention horror fans, I am thrilled to announce my collaboration with the legendary Fangoria. Whether you're a die-hard horror fanatic or you just love a good scare, Fangoria's got you covered with the best in horror news, features, and collectibles. And guess what? As a special treat for my listeners, you can now get 20% off your entire order at Fangoria.com. Just use promo code The Eric Fright Show at checkout. Don't miss out on this killer deal. Stock up on all things horror and join the frightful fun. Stay spooky, my friends. Now, back to the show. If you haven't been listening and you just jumped to segment 2, just for the sake of sakes, we are talking about Buffy the Vampire Slayer from 1992. Let's start off on the right foot and tell you the plot from IMDb. And this plot, guys, is freaking hilarious to me. The plot is flighty teenage girl Buffy Summers learns that she is her generation's destined battler of vampires. Flighty teenage girl. I don't think I've ever heard that phrase ever in my life. And I don't know if I would describe Buffy as a flighty teenage girl, but whatever. The rating for this movie on IMDb is a 5.7 out of 10 with a 43% on Rotten Tomatoes. Higher than I thought because I do know that people look down on this movie, so I really was expecting something different from these sources. Rotten Tomatoes does not surprise me because it's Rotten Tomatoes, and to me, they never give the scores to the movies I like to what I would give. So let's dive into the characters a little bit. Coming first, obviously, is Buffy, who's played by Kristy Swanson. Buffy is a unique blend of a high school valley girl and a reluctant hero. That's how it would be to describe Buffy. Then we have Merrick, who's played by the late Donald Sutherland, who just passed away. Rest in peace. He's Buffy's first watcher. He can be depicted as a stoic and somewhat mysterious mentor who is tasked with guiding and training Buffy in her role as the Slayer. Then we got Pike, who's portrayed by the late Luke Perry. There's like a theme with these people passing away. It's kind of sad because they're people that were like part of my childhood. But Pike can be described as a bit of an unlikely hero and Buffy's eventual ally. Now we got some villains, right? We have Lothos, who is played by Rutger Hauer. He is our primary antagonist and a powerful vampire lord. Then we have Amelin, portrayed by the late Paul Rubens, who was also Pee Wee Herman, if no one knew. He's Lothos' right-hand vampire and provides a mix of menace and comic relief. And then last, we have Benny, who is played by David Arquette. He's Pike's best friend who undergoes a transformation after being turned into a vampire. Now, there are some other characters that were in this movie. Well, specifically, Hilary Swank was in this movie. I loved her character, but I don't like to name like every single person in the movie, just the people that like I would say are the main cast, I would say. But just so if anyone's like, oh, you didn't name this one, you didn't name that one, that's why. Because some of these cast lists are so long, it would just take me forever to just go through them all. So I really try to get the bulk of the people in the movie and to move on. So those are some of the characters in the movie, the main characters of Buffy, and how they would be described and how I would describe them, right? So now that we have that, now we're going to do what we also always do, and what is the themes, right? This is like one of my favorite parts of this segment, is to dive into the themes of our movies. So some of these themes are found in this movie. So number one, it's a coming of age theme, right? The film revolves around Buffy's transformation from a shallow high school cheerleader to a responsible and courageous vampire slayer. This coming of age theme highlights her personal growth and transition from adolescence to adulthood. So if you guys have seen this movie, we already know, like, Buffy really just doesn't want anything to do with this life at all. Which takes us right into our second theme of this movie, which is responsibility and destiny. So Buffy initially does resist her destiny as the Slayer, preferring her carefree teenage life. So that theme of accepting and embracing one's responsibilities is a central part to the story as Buffy learns to take on the mantle of the Slayer and protect her community. We do see that growth throughout the entire movie, especially I think a pivotal part in that growth is the death of Merrick. Spoiler alert if you haven't seen it, but I think that really helped push her to that next level. Speaking of death and all of that, our third theme is good versus evil. So obviously the classic battle between good and evil is at the heart of this film, obviously. Buffy and her allies are representing the forces of good, and then we have the vampires embodying evil. The theme is explored through various confrontations and fights that take place throughout the film. The other theme we have here is empowerment. Buffy is a journey of empowerment. She discovers her strength, her physical and mental strength, right? It is resonated with the idea that individuals, especially young women, can find power within themselves to overcome challenges and adversities. Now, even though I'm not a woman, this theme is what attracted me to Buffy, the empowerment, to find power within themselves, to overcome challenges and adversities. And as a young boy struggling with his sexuality and faced with the struggles that I was facing at home, Buffy was an escape, and Buffy was showing me that I can also overcome those challenges. Then we have another theme, which is friendship and loyalty. The relationships between the characters in this movie, particularly Buffy and her friends, as well as Pike's loyalty to Buffy, underscore the importance of friendship and support in facing difficult times. Like, obviously it's a comedy, so we don't like always want to put too much thought into it, but like when we really dissect these things, like Buffy in the movie and Buffy in the show, one of the central things there too is friendship and loyalty. They have the Scooby Gang in the show. Buffy really always the importance of friendship and support during these difficult times in the show and as well as in the movie is a very strong theme. Then we have the duality of identity, right? So Buffy's character is grappling with the duality of her identity, being a normal teenager as well as the powerful Slayer. This theme is explored on how she has to balance these two aspects of her life and integrate them to become a more complete person. So that's another theme that really stuck with me. Like, she's got this whole type of responsibility, but it's a secret to everyone else. She's not supposed to tell anyone else that she's the Slayer and she was chosen. And it was something that was given to her without, she never asked for that life. But now she has to figure out how to coexist as both the Slayer and a 16-year-old girl. It's really like a deep theme. And part of that moves on to the next theme, which is sacrifice. So like the theme of sacrifice is so evident in the actions of characters like Merrick, who gave up his life to protect and train Buffy, right? But also in Buffy's willingness to risk her own life to save others. Sacrifice is a big theme in this and a noble and necessary part of being a hero. All the big movies, like watch any Avengers or superhero movie, it's all about sacrificing, putting yourself out in front of others, right? And that's no different when it comes to Buffy. And then the last theme I want to touch on is overcoming stereotypes. So Buffy really breaks away from the stereotype of the ditzy cheerleader, showing people are more complex than they freaking appear. Because like I can't stand when you're just stereotyping people. Maybe it's because I'm a gay man and I'm a feminine gay man. I have a lot of stereotypes attached to me, but in this theme, it really encouraged looking beyond superficial judgments to understand a person's true capabilities and potentials. Because like when we first meet her, she's like, duh, and this one note kind of girl. But when she's the Slayer and she really starts to evolve, we see that she's so much more. And I love that we get to see that growth of her in this movie because it really could have just been her being that one note ditzy cheerleader if they really wanted to, who has the super strength and like defeats vampires like by accident. You know what I mean? Like that would have just been a completely different kind of movie. But instead we got this, which brings me to my personal thoughts on the film. Again, another movie that I don't really remember seeing for the first time. I was 6 years old when this movie came out, so it's been over 30 years since this movie was released. And I know many people like to pit the movie against the show, but I'm not that person. I know that there are some discrepancies and differences, but I feel like that's because when they decided to do the show, they had to make her a little younger and change a little bit of the storyline to make it work. But other than that, the idea and the themes to me remain the same. I love how it had some moments of complete ridiculousness, but also really deep scenes that made you care about the character. Especially Buffy, not just Buffy, but Merrick and Pike. Like, you cared about them. You cared about all of them. And us as audience members are watching this typical teenage girl lose everything that she thought she knew about the world and what she was going to be in it. So like there's comedy, but also like a deep sense of loneliness and drama to this movie that I think is what is real genius about it, right? They don't just make it so ridiculous that we can't connect on a personal level at all. They really make it something that we want to connect with, and I think that's what makes it so freaking special. I'm going to share like a quick story time with you. So a few years ago, my friend and I actually went to go see this movie in an outdoor movie night at a place called Grounds for Sculptures in New Jersey. It's like a big grounds of like sculptures, no, like art exhibits and stuff. They were doing like a summer movie night, and the movie they were doing was Buffy the Vampire Slayer. And my friend and I worked together at the time, and I remember we bonded over liking that movie together because it was obscure to us, to both find someone that really liked that movie. And we would, from that moment on, would always sing the cheer song, like, how funky is your chicken? How loose is your goose? Your goose is totally loose. Now, you know I was not going to make an episode and not do the fucking cheer. Still do that cheer. I know the little bit of the dance. If you could see me, but you can't, I'm doing a little bit of it right now. I just, I don't know. It was a really good time watching it out on the movie on the lawn, like on the grass and stuff. That was super fun and a moment that I'll always think about when I think about this movie. But I think that a reason that I really loved this movie was I gravitated towards strong females, really. I've always been a horror kid, but Buffy was really like the first person I saw who was chosen to combat evil, like I said before. Like, she was my hero. She became my hero and who I really wanted to be. She was just stylish and funny and just strong, and she didn't take nobody's freaking shit at all. Even when she was facing Lothos, Buffy was like still slinging those one-liners. Like, I remember the scene where she like pulls out her hairspray and like sprays him with it. Like, I love those kind of moments and things in movies and TV shows, especially with Buffy. Like, it's what makes it so great. I just thought it was fucking great. I will say that the little Spidey Sensei crams were too much. Like, and this is not me being like, maybe it is me being like a man thing, but I just think that they did it. I'm glad they didn't take that over into the show, because I thought it was like, it took away some of the seriousness of it. And I know it wasn't fully serious, but if it would have carried over into the show, I don't think the show would have been able to stay as serious as it did with every time she was near someone, she got a cramp. You know what I mean? It was a welcomed departure away. That was one of the things I'm glad they did not carry over. And yeah, so let's end this segment, I should say, with my favorite kill from this movie. Everybody knows what my favorite kill is. It's probably everyone's favorite kill, and rightfully so. It's definitely the death of Amelin. Fucking Christ. It is so crazy. It's such an iconic and hilarious scene. Like, just the, and he's just like kicking the wall over and over again, and then like you think he's dead, and he gets back up, he's like, and then like, I think it carries over even during the credits. It's still happening, and so eventually he eventually dies. I believe so. So like, does this actually count as a favorite kill? Is he actually dead? I don't know. That character was amazing. I remember he's like, Buffy. Like, it's just weird. It's just weird. I need to watch this movie now. Thank God I recently bought it on Blu-ray, so I can just revisit it whenever I want. But that concludes segment 2, Featured Fright. And now we're going to move into segment 3, which is Frightful Facts. So here are some 10 interesting facts about the 1992 movie Buffy the Vampire Slayer, and where you can find these facts, same place that I found them. So fact number 1 is Joss Whedon, the creator of Buffy, originally envisioned the movie as a dark, haunted parable of adolescence. However, due to creative differences with the director and actors, the final product turned out more comedic and campy than intended, and Whedon ultimately disavowed the movie. So that is from Creepy Catalog and Movie Phone. Fact number 2 is casting changes. Alyssa Milano was originally considered for the role of Buffy before it went to Kristy Swanson. Additionally, Donald Sutherland, who played Merrick, often rewrote his lines, which frustrated Whedon, and that is over from Creepy Catalog. I did not know Alyssa Milano was originally considered for the role of Buffy, but being who she was back then makes a lot of sense, and I'm really glad that we got Kristy Swanson. I love her, and I don't know if Alyssa would have done like, she was a great Phoebe, and I loved her in Charmed, and I don't know if we would have gotten that performance if she would have been Buffy in the movie. Third fact we have here is dealing with Luke Perry's involvement. So Luke Perry, who played Pike, took the role because the script made him laugh on every page. He also worked double shifts while filming Beverly Hills 90210 during the day and Buffy at night. That fact is from Creepy Catalog. Love him. Oh my God, Dylan from 90210. Everyone's freaking heartthrob back then, right? Fourth fact we have is an unscripted death scene. So Paul Reubens, known for his role as Pee Wee Herman, which we mentioned, we know he was Amelin, and he ad-libbed his character's humorous and prolonged death scene. So that's hilarious. Like, that wasn't even in the script. He's like, you know what? I'm just going to keep not dying. That's hilarious. That fact is from Creepy Catalog as well. Fun fact for number 5, Seth Green's cameo. Seth Green, who was Oz in the Buffy show, he had a minor role in the movie, but most of his scenes were cut, but you can still see the back of his head for a few seconds in like some of the scenes. That's from Movie Phone. So that's pretty cool. Seth Green was trying to get into Buffy's world, or they were trying to get Seth Green into the world of Buffy, even in the movie. So another fact is future stars, which I mentioned earlier. The movie was the film debut of Hilary Swank, who played Buffy's friend Kimberly, but also Ben Affleck had a small uncredited role as a basketball player. That fact is from Creepy Catalog. Now, I knew Hilary Swank was in it, but I didn't know it was her film debut. I love Hilary Swank. So that's really cool that I get to see her, and that was her first film, right? Fact number 7, the budget and earnings. So the film had a budget of $9 million, right? But it earned $16.6 million at the North American box office. So that made it an actual modest success, according to MoviePhone. So fact number 8 is talking about what we were just talking about before, which is the vampire lore and how this was actually a unique situation where Buffy compares her menstrual cramps that she experiences when she's near them. And we already mentioned it wasn't carried over to the TV show, but that was only ever done in this movie, and no other vampire movie has a lore like that where Hunter and the vampires experience any kind of like connection with each other that I'm aware of. Fact number 9. Script to comic book. So elements of Whedon's original script, including Merrick's suicide and Buffy burning down the school gym, were never filmed, but were later included in a comic book adaptation titled The Origin. And that both facts, 8 and 9, are from Creepy Catalog. And we're going to finish off this segment with our 10th fact, which is dealing with creative differences. The director Fran Rubel-Cousy and actor Donald Sutherland often clashed over creative choices, with Cousy noting that Sutherland was a significant challenge to work with due to his insistence on changing the script. That fact is from MoviePhone, but I am hoping, it seems like Sutherland had a big part in his role, and his role is iconic, so kudos to him for standing up and fighting to make those changes, because I'm very happy that that we got what we got. And that's the end of segment 3, and it's time to go to our 4th and final segment of the show, Fright Picks. Alright guys, I decided to give you some movies to watch that are all vampire movies, because there's so many, and I just was like, let's try to stay on theme. So first Fright Pick is Fright Night, the original. So Fright Night sees a teenager believing that the newcomer in his neighborhood is a vampire. He turns to an actor in a television-hosted horror movie show for help to deal with the undead. Fright Night is on Max. And just a little disclaimer, when I'm telling you where you can find these movies to stream, there are other places, obviously, that you can find them if you don't have one of these services. I'm just picking one of the popular ones, but feel free to Google where you can find them. Second Fright Pick is The Lost Boys. Now, we already talked about this earlier. The plot for that is, after moving to a new town, two brothers discover that the area is a haven for vampires. You can rent this on Amazon for $3.79. Fright Pick number 3, guys, is Underworld, with the plot of Celine, a vampire warrior, is entrenched in a conflict between vampires and werewolves while falling in love with Michael, a human who is sought by werewolves for unknown reasons. You can also rent that on Amazon Prime. I did not write the price down, so sorry. Fourth Fright Pick is From Dusk Till Dawn. Plot is two criminals and their hostages unknowingly seek temporary refuge in a truck stop populated by vampires with chaotic results. And that's If you have a Showtime subscription, you can watch it there. And our last fright pick is Blade. The plot is a half vampire, half mortal man becomes a protector of the mortal race while slaying evil vampires. And that's also available to rent on Amazon. So I think that all of these movies are just amazing. But there's so many on here that I think every single one that I picked, I need to go back and revisit because it's been a while since I've watched them. So it's a test for not just you guys out there, but for me. But that's it, guys. Thanks for joining me on another episode of the Eric Fright Show. I appreciate you all. Stay safe and keep it frightening, everybody. That's a wrap on this episode of the Eric Fright Show. Thanks for tuning in and letting me share my love of horror with you. If you enjoyed the show, please take a moment to rate and review it on your favorite podcast platform. It really helps me reach more horror fans like you. Don't forget to subscribe so you never miss an episode. And until next time, stay spooky and keep it frightening.